anywhere, just FYI. So Lisa, why don't you let me know when you want me to...
Okay, David, I'm assuming we're going to wait for Rhonda to log in.
I'm assuming so, but I will keep an eye on the list. We should be seeing about 20 attendees, just so you know.
Okay, I'm going to let you let us know, David, when you think we've reached critical mass, since you know who's attending. Okay.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this first of three presentations on blogging and content, and blog content by Ian Laurie of Portent. We will be recording this session, but we're recording all audio, so please ensure that your phones are muted. And we will commence in about 1 minute.
And I should say I am recording video as well. Just want to make sure everybody knew that your voices are being recorded for posterity. So,
right, Ian. I think we have critical mass.
Okay. So, welcome everybody. Just want to check first that everyone can hear me okay. Also, just want to make sure everybody understands I'm recording both audio and video, so please mute your microphones while you're not asking questions. I can already hear somebody echoing in the background there, so please make sure you mute your microphones unless you have a question. So this training is going to be about content creation for marketing and blogging specifically. I am going to touch on other kinds of content, just to put it all in context. Today's training is going to be pretty widely sweeping. I'm going to talk about the world of content in general, the basic steps involved in creation, how you research an audience, and then we're going to go into much more specifics in the next two sessions. So first question, I'm sure a lot of people have, is who exactly is this guy? You probably think I'm someone who's been trained to train about content and has had very little experience with marketing or something like that. That is not me. I have put a lot of time into marketing. In fact, much more than the time I spent in law school, which I passed, but just barely, and that may explain why. The only thing I put more time into is parenting, which just keeps going up. So, and we'll probably continue to do so. So a lot of people also think that content is just the latest marketing bandwagon, right? That all marketers are now screaming and shouting about content. It's the big thing, and it too will die a death of all other forms of marketing, like the concept of push and pull, and I don't know, audience engagement metrics and things like that. Not really. Because marketing without content is just crickets. There is no way to market without it. It's essential, and that's why we're here for this training. Just a quick overview. Today's the first session, and I'm going to do the quick why and what of content, and then talk a little bit more about the how. I'll run through the overall process, and then for the 2 days after this, I'm going to go through all the steps in the process in much more depth. So today you'll get that overarching picture, and then the next two sessions you'll get more specifics on each part. There is some theoretical hand-waving to this, but as we go through today and the rest of the course, you'll see that there's a lot less. It'll go down as time goes on, and we'll get much more down to very specific tools and numbers and procedures. So just kind of keep that in mind. I do have a link bundle up, and this is where all course materials will be placed. That includes a whole bunch of links to different things I reference and some tools. Also, though, links to, yes, stuff up on the unsecure Google Drive that is also currently down for the entire internet, apparently. So, yeah, Google Drive. Apparently, we should be using something from NetIQ or something like that. I don't know. So, big question is, why even worry about content? Like, isn't this just a, kind of a niche thing at a company? And the answer is, content is a delivery of information in a way that generates emotional response. And that emotional response really goes to everything that you can do in marketing. If you take a look at this, this is sort of how marketing fits together, right? And the only things that can more fundamentally affect your marketing are analytics and infrastructure. Content is kind of important because without it, you can't have paid, earned, and owned, which are the three basic channels for all marketing. And a lot of people look at content as this tunnel-driven thing, and I don't really believe in the funnel. Sorry, the funnel-driven thing, not the tunnel. Google Drive really has me all thrown all over the place. Oh, and Michael now says Google Drive got hacked. Okay, if you guys give us a free NetIQ account, we'll put everything up on your storage solution. But anyway, there isn't really a funnel. It's cyclical. And if you take a look here, this is kind of how the customer process works, right? Someone becomes aware, then they have a problem, so they enter into this consideration and intent process. Then if they purchase, that can generate loyalty depending on their experience, and then that turns them into another bit of marketing energy for your company. And most companies focus on content for these last three steps: consideration, intent, and conversion, right? That's it. Everyone puts all their time and energy into this. But they need this. If no one can discover you, if no one can find you, then it's really, really hard to move things forward because you're dependent on people already being in the consideration phase. They already know about you. They already trust you. They already think that you're at least relatively valuable compared to your competitors. How are you going to establish that if you can't get people into this discovery process? It's very, very difficult, and you cut yourself off from a large chunk of your audience. And that's really why content has become such a buzzword in marketing. It's not because content is a new thing, because again, it's been around ever since marketing and even before then. It's because we've been ignoring this and neglecting this entire area of the customer experience. And a good way to look at this is, the very first investment your potential customer makes in you is time, right? They come to your site, they listen to you, they read the brochure, they look at the billboard if you're doing a consumer product, whatever it might be. And in exchange, you deliver some content. That's what you're doing. It doesn't have to be a blog post, it could be anything. But content has to provide this return on time invested. If it can't, then what happens is basically you're wasting people's money because you're wasting their time. You're not giving them a good return on time invested, which I'll always refer to as ROTI, because if I keep saying return on time invested, we'll run out of time, ironically. So if there's no RTI or a negative RTI, then that generates a negative emotional response. People feel like you wasted their time. And that's really the key here, okay? Content is a product. It's part of what you're delivering to people, and they're purchasing it from you with their time. And just so I'm not just kind of, again, theoretically hand-waving, companies with blogs that meet some minimal requirement of good, meaning they're not stealing content, their grammar is good, they don't do nothing, they do more than just sell their products. They're generally delivering 67% more leads per month. This is B2B, not B2C. This is only B2B. For our B2B customers, content is the number one reason that their customers follow them online. In other words, if they're going to get people into that widest part of the funnel that people often refer to, it's because of their content. And when I say content, I don't mean brand content. I don't mean sales content. I mean content that helps people learn about the industry and the space and the products that they're looking at buying. A content-focused lead campaign, at least in our experience, is about half as expensive as a traditional marketing campaign. For the money, it's going to generate double the leads. And if you want to see a lot of where we're getting this data, you can go to the link bundle, which of course currently probably is not working, but I'll give you the link later anyway. It's never happened to me before, I honest. So what's content? That's really the next big question. And again, I'm giving you this high-level view, so this is all in context. But just understand, there are really three kinds of content in my mind. There's 70, 20, and 10% content. And 70% is sort of the typical blog post that we all think of. 500, 750 words. One person can produce it. You know, it should take less than 2 hours to create. If it takes more, something's probably not right. You know, it should be something that's useful one time to your audience, and that's it. So it's scalable, it's easily repeatable. 20% content takes longer. It requires, you know, it may require 2 or more people. It requires more effort. It also may be more risky. And when I say risky, I don't mean you're going to be dropping F-bombs on your blog. What I mean is you're talking about things that may be minimally controversial, or things that may have people coming and reading your content, but they may not ever purchase from you. And that's not as risky as it sounds, because the real idea is they come and read your content and then they talk to other people about you and then they come and purchase, but people still consider that a risk. And then 10% content requires a full team. It takes a lot of time. It's what I would call evergreen, meaning it's always going to be valuable. It's a lot of effort. It's going to have very high production value no matter what it is. It could be text, it could be anything. And some examples of each type. So when you have 70% content, you know, that's really generally going to be a blog post or a single image, maybe a very basic screencast, but that's really about it. Maybe basic Q&A as well. 20% content is blog posts, but probably with higher production value, more time put in. They're going to be screencasts. They're going to be slide decks that you've already put together, and you're going to make some changes to and then post. And then 10% content is going to be highly data driven. You know, some people say it's just infographics. I would say it's more than infographics, but it's anything that involves a lot of data and presenting that data in a very compelling way. It can be video and audio, but much more full featured video and audio than just a screencast. And it can be interactive content, so tools, games, tests, data explorers, whatever. And again, just remember, most companies focus exclusively on consideration, intent, and conversion-focused content. It's not a bad thing necessarily, it's just what we've all learned to do. I mean, when I was doing direct marketing years and years ago, that was what we did, right? Because we were already delivering the mail directly to people's mailboxes. When you do TV or stuff for trade shows, it's the same thing. But we're in a kind of a different world now. We have access to a much wider audience. It's not a problem, it's an enhancement. It's our ability to do more stuff than we could do before. So we're going to focus on these first 4 steps. And the content that fits those first 4 steps is 70-20-10, and it's things like blog and social posting, so blog post to Twitter and Facebook, things like that, or in your case, LinkedIn and Reddit and Hacker News. Images, video, infographics, interactive stuff, just things that aren't necessarily selling the product. It's not because I don't think you should do that content. It's because I'm sure you have that nailed. Okay? I probably don't need to teach you how to do white papers, interactive content for your company, images and videos showing your product, or product and support information that's directly related to sales. I'm sure you know how to do that. I'm not going to spend time on it. I'm going to talk about how you create and measure the content that fits into those first 4 steps, right? That's what we really have to focus on here. And the process I'm going to talk about all through this training is this 7-step procedure. And it starts with these things that you probably do once per quarter, maybe just once per period. So if you have a 1-year product cycle or a 6-month product cycle or a 3-month product cycle, each of the things that say once, you're going to do them once in that cycle. So you're going to sketch out your customers, and that should take about 5 hours. It's a big effort. You're going to map the customer journey. I'll talk about that in a minute. You're going to find your gaps in your content. You're going to look for micro conversions, and you're going to analyze behaviors that lead to those micro conversions. Those are things you're going to do once. The calendar, the editorial calendar, is something you'll work on as often as you need to. And then, of course, content is something you're doing eternally. Now, I know this course is on blogging, focused on blogging and blog content. I'm still going through these first 6 steps because these first 6 steps still drive blogging. And thankfully, you can apply them to much bigger content projects if and when you get there and you want to do them. And if we have time or if you have questions, I can talk to you about sourcing those projects. I won't just say source them to Portent. I'll give you places to go to source them. But we can talk about how you do some of that larger stuff as well. So the first step is really sketching out the customer. And again, we're going to go into a lot more detail about this. Just understand that with tools from Google, except Google Drive, that joke never gets old, really. If you look at Google's display planner, you can type in a particular key phrase and get tons of demographic data. So I'm not talking about going to Experian or Nielsen or paying them a ton of money. If you want to, that's awesome. Those tools are great. But it's also, if you just want to do a very quick analysis, you can. Google Analytics now even includes demographic and affinity segment data. So if you want to enable that, that's a really good way to go. The reason that they have enable here is because it does mean your data is shown to other people. They don't show it saying NetIQ's data is this. They don't show your specific data. They aggregate it all. And that's how they deliver data on demographics and affinity segments. And I would say enable it because chances are Google can get all that data anyway. This way, at least you know it's being released. You can use things like Google Predict. So when you start to type in a phrase, you'll see that Google gives you some instant ideas, other phrases to search on. This is a good way to see what your customers are looking for. So if you're going to be doing content for disaster recovery, you can look at this and immediately say, oh, okay, people want to be able to create a recovery plan. They want to be able to, look at the kinds of things they can get. You may need to add data into this. This may be too general, but just some basic ideas. You can do the same thing on YouTube, where apparently jokes about disaster recovery are also really interesting. I don't know. And then in Google AdWords, the regular pay-per-click marketing tool set, you can actually go in and find specific segments and then drill down through them and find things that are interesting. And you can do the same thing on LinkedIn. So you can just type in disaster recovery, and then you can take a look at all the different things. And in fact, here, just to make sure that I'm getting the right topic set, I can actually take a look here and NetIQ shows up. So I know I'm doing the right disaster recovery search here. I'm probably not getting into FEMA style disaster recovery stuff. I could be wrong, but really important thing here, there is an entire group on LinkedIn that talks about disaster recovery, and actually there's nobody there. So you might want to go there and take a quick look, because that might be an opportunity for you. So now you've kind of figured out who your customers are by taking a quick look at this. And notice, I'm not creating big detailed personas. I will talk about that next time, but you don't need to. Okay, you don't necessarily need to. If you're putting together blog posts, you don't have to turn this into an existential journey. Okay, you can just go to Google, type in a phrase, see what else is showing up, and use that to guide your next blog post. Because you're spending a couple of hours on each one. I don't know how frequently each of you will be writing one, but the idea here is to iterate through ideas, put stuff up there, see what's gaining a lot of notice, see what works best when you promote it, which I'll also be talking about, and then further focus in on that kind of stuff, and then repeat the process. So you're always testing new audiences, you're always looking at different customer profiles, and you're always finding new, really effective ways to get in front of folks all the way back at that awareness phase, and then bringing them through and all the way around to the very beginning to success, referral, and everything else. Now, mapping the customer journey is not a super guru-style gazing at the sky kind of term, nor will it make me into a lemur. What it's really about is the classic Western story arc. Okay, the story arc is this concept in any story you tell, whether it's fiction, true life, business stuff, whatever. There's always this period of, okay, exposition, here's what I'm doing, here's what I do. Then there's the period of, something seems to be going wrong, or I seem to be facing a challenge. Then there's that moment of complete panic, or just the moment when you start to make a decision. You make your decision, and then hopefully you reap the rewards of that decision. For NetIQ, again, I'm going pretty broad here just based on what we've learned of your company, but it's something like this. All right, you see basic awareness of the issue, of an issue. So say I'm a person starting at a company and I realize that the company maybe doesn't have a good solution in place for some particular thing that NetIQ does, or they have one and it's not working very well. I start thinking about it, I start researching and considering, but that's because I'm aware, because I discovered you because of content. Then my boss comes to me and says, hey, we need this. which is when things reach a crisis, and then I convert, and then if you help me succeed, then this becomes this self-enforcing cycle. Right, so that's the whole point here, is you want to catch people back in that awareness phase instead of at consideration, and then bring them all the way around again so that they're then becoming marketers for you. And your content can do all of that. So just an example, more specific example around backups. I know I'm totally oversimplifying your products, but just a quick idea of how this works. And this is how I usually sketch out a customer journey. You can do it on a piece of paper. It doesn't matter. This is just how I map it to this kind of rubric we have. And the thing to look at here is, just look at the steps that I've mapped out for what I would consider a typical audience at NetIQ. Again, very quick analysis by me, but first step is I'm looking at useful stuff. I'm not necessarily looking for something from NetIQ yet. I'm probably not. I'm just thinking about it. Maybe at lunchtime I go through my RSS feed, or maybe I do that, in downtime at work or whatever else. Maybe I read a journal or something like that. Then maybe I learn about my company's lack of a solution, or someone comes and tells me something just failed and I don't want it to happen again. Then I start doing research, and because I've already discovered you through some form of passive content discovery, which could be social media, recommendations from other people, whatever else, then I do my research. And I probably learned some best practices, and those best practices are hopefully taught to me by you. And hopefully, because I remember you, because I'm aware of you, I come to you as one of my sources for research. So that's how I start to get into the consideration phase, where I need information about checking dependencies, comparing products. Then I check requirements, contact the provider. Then I purchase and install, and if it goes really well, I start referring you. And that's where I'm generating content for you, because I'm telling other people, hey, check this out, this is great. And then I send those messages out over my network, and then we're back to awareness. So third step here, you want to mine the gaps. And what you want to do here is just find where you do not have content. So as an example here, again, going back to that initial discussion about what companies generally have and don't have. If you look at your process right now, probably a lot of what you're missing is around awareness. And I've read the blog on netiq.com. There's some stuff there. There can be more. There can be gaps that you fill, and we'll do a much more detailed customer journey outline in the next session. You can do a formal content inventory and look at everything on the site. This group probably shouldn't have to do that. The person who, the team that manages all content is the one who would do a major inventory, but you don't necessarily have to. It's not a bad idea if you're really getting down into the weeds with this. And I will give you examples of a formal inventory. I am going to assign homework. I promise you it will not be more than 20 to 40 minutes. So, you want to take a look, though, at the journey for your products. You want to get as specific as you can. Again, it could be written on a piece of paper. Just have a list in your, written down and in front of you, so that when we talk about this stuff in the next session, you're ready to really discuss it. We don't have to do the mapping during the session. The next step is to find the micro conversions along the way. And micro conversions can be things like someone signing up for a newsletter, or someone sharing a piece of your content. It can also be someone spending more than a certain number of minutes or page views on your site, if you can identify that that is something that people do, and then convert in a macro sense, make a purchase, whatever, in a much bigger way and much more often. And Google Analytics can actually help you do this. So you can map things through initial steps. And this is a very simplistic view of it, and I know this makes some people want to scoop their eyes out with spoons, but if you take a look here, this is just by source. It's looking at where people come from. And it's kind of telling you, okay, you know what, Google's probably not a bad source, because if you look at all the funny wavy lines here, people do go straight to the form page after coming from Google. But you can also look at events. You can look at the way people behave on your site. And something that I probably should talk to your analytics team about more than the content team, but I will show you the possibilities. You can also just use your brain. Again, we don't have to turn this into this major analytical process. Okay, it can be, and I love making it that. But if you're putting together blog posts on a rotating basis, if you have minimal time to do this, if you're iterating a lot and you don't want to do that analysis every single time, just sit down and think about it. I mean, for your customers who are making fairly large purchases, I would think in many cases, what are the things that they're going to do if they're more likely to become customers, right? What are the things that are the behaviors that you want to elicit? Certainly you want them downloading white papers. You want them to read content before they're in the consideration phase. You want them to pass that content along. Those are things that you want to look at and eventually attach value to them. And this is going to sound kind of nuts, but it actually works pretty well. Again, you can use the event tool. This is Portent's site, and I'm just throwing out numbers here so you can see how this works. So let's say we see that for every email sign up on our email series, we get a $10,000 customer. These are made up numbers. The proportions are right. The numbers are not. That would mean that a single email sign up is worth about $200. And I'm hoping I did my math right there. I think I did. I'm a content guy, not a math guy. So if I know that, I can then look at the behaviors that lead to those micro conversions. So if I know that people who visit the philosophy page on our site have a 1% micro conversion rate to signing up for that email series, then I know that people who come to the philosophy page are worth $2. That's how you analyze content. That's how you measure the success of content. And that's also how you can analyze the success of content that sends people to the philosophy page. So what I'm doing is I'm backing in to a value proposition for all the content on my site. Again, I'm going to go through this in a lot of detail, but if you get the basic picture here, which is that you've got your macro conversion, which is a purchase. You have your micro conversions, which are things like contacting NetIQ. Then you've got things that lead to that. If you can attach a value to the contact us, so if you can talk to your sales team and find out X number of leads turn into Y number of clients worth Z amount of dollars, then you can work that backwards all the way to the value of an individual piece of content. So this isn't just sort of waving your hands and saying content's important. You can really provide specific numbers. So with all that in mind, so now you know who your audience is, you know what their kind of journey is to purchasing your product, you know the kinds of actions they're going to take on the way, and you have a pretty good understanding of what those actions are worth. Now's when you can start working on your content calendar. And just so you understand, the calendar should be a reference tool. It should be the starting point of a discussion around your content. It should not be this kind of set of railroad tracks where if you do something outside the content calendar, it has to wait. That is not the objective of a content calendar. The objective of a content calendar is to provide guidance, to provide ideas for what can be written over time and let you get started on some of those things, particularly if they require more resources, but you can always add to and change it because your market is going to change. Issues are going to show up. And I have two kinds of content calendars that I use. The first one is sort of an overarching content planner. And by the way, there are examples of these up on the link bundle. The content planner just breaks down how often I'm going to do which kind of content. 70, 20, 10. And that really seems like something that David and his team will probably do for the most part, and then use that to guide the specific calendar. And I'm sorry this is so teeny, but there's a lot of stuff in it. You want to put in the date that you submit an idea for publication, the date that it's going to be published, a prospective title, the target audience, who the writer is going to be, who's going to review it, the 70, 20, 10 category, whether it's in for publication or out for review, in for creation or out for review, and then the status. These are the kinds of things we use here. We have a lot of freelancers working with us, and we know them all, so we want to be able to walk them in and out of the process as needed. But it works really well in-house as well, especially if you've got lots of different marketing managers and product managers all submitting content. 3 critical rules around the content calendar. Just keep it simple times 3. I don't know how often I've had to tell this to folks. I've seen a lot of organizations get completely hung up on planning their content calendar. And again, I just have to reemphasize, the content calendar is not the end point, it's the starting point. So if other stuff comes up, you should do it. If there isn't 100% buy-in and agreement on everything on the calendar, that's okay. Now, if there are things that people simply don't want written or things that they feel must be written, that is the purpose of creating a calendar. It's to get those ideas out in front of everyone as far in advance as possible, not to nail things down, but just to avoid wasting time on it later. So you can get down to writing and know, okay, here's what I can or can't do. Here's what I'm supposed to, here's what we really need to produce. Then you create, and I'm going to spend obviously the vast majority of our time in the rest of this training course on content creation. And for me, there are these 8 basic rules around content creation. The first one is just that really, until you've convinced them, nobody cares. Okay, they simply don't care about what you're writing and your product, and that's kind of a harsh reality. But we are essentially egocentric creatures. Until we see something really, really useful. And we know it's going to be useful. Until we know we're going to get that return on time invested, it's very hard for us to take action. That's why we do, by the way, audience analysis. That's why we find the questions that people are going to answer. That's why we try to anticipate their journey to a purchase, because we do want to be useful to them, and the way to do that is to make sure that we are going to be able to demonstrate to them right away that this matters to them. So I just took a few articles off of your blog and just talked about, want to talk about how you sell the page. Okay, so you can refer to things in a very factual way, and that's fine if you're writing things, I think, for support, if you're writing them at the consideration and intent stage, because people are already there. They don't need to be convinced that that this matters to them, because they're already trying to make a decision. It matters to them. Before they're trying to make that decision, when you're just trying to get in at the awareness phase and vastly expand the potential customer pool, that's when you really want to sell the content. You want to sell the page. So you want to give a reason to take a look at it. Now, from my perspective, this is what it would be. But I also know as a developer, sometimes I'm just looking for... sorry, it's coming back for a second. I just picked stuff at random, by the way. So don't assume that I'm trying to say that this is the blog that you should be. This is not the particular blog that I'm talking about. This is just something I'm using as a concept. So as a developer, I know sometimes I'm out looking for things, and as the head of a company, I know sometimes I'm out just looking for answers to things. And I see titles of articles, or I see stuff at the top of an article that makes me think maybe it's going to answer my question. But if I look at a Google search result, maybe I'm not sure. The more you can do to make it clear to people that whatever it is that you're writing will answer their question, the better. So as an example here, this is an article aimed at fairly technical people, but these are also people who are impatient, they have a problem, and they need to fix that problem. So just provide the actual steps. If you're talking about the process around buying a particular product, if you're talking about a piece of data that you just found in the industry, if you're giving a report, in a report you always provide kind of that executive summary. And what I'm saying is do the same thing. Provide that summary, but do it in a way that really sells the page. Here are some things that you haven't heard before that you're really going to want to see. Or, we talked to this many people, and here's what we've found. So the second rule here is you want to pass the blank sheet of paper test. And what's really, really important is that you provide a piece of content that if you write it on a blank sheet of paper and show it to a knowledgeable stranger, they know what it's going to mean. And the things I apply that to are content titles, headings and subheadings, any little chunk of content that could be taken out of context and put into a search result, an RSS feed, things like that. And I'm going to go through some really interesting examples of that working well and poorly in the next session. But the important thing is blank sheet of paper test. If you walk away from this training knowing nothing else, understand 70-20-10 and the blank sheet of paper test. Because the place I most often see content fail on the internet is the blank sheet of paper test, because people simply can't figure out what they're going to get when they start reading. And again, they want to know that return on time invested. If you can't guarantee that return on time invested, they probably won't show up because there's plenty of other things out there that are providing that guarantee. The next thing is just, you got to just say it. And I know, you all have a lot of experience with this, so I probably don't have to spend much time on it, but there are certain phrases and words and styles of writing that really can slow down the process of getting through a piece of content. And I have a huge list of these in the link bundle. I think it's about 200 of them. So just take a look at that. Never use two words where one will do. Reading online is incredibly difficult. It's incredibly challenging. People are increasingly reading the content using Pocket or some other tool on their phone or on their other handheld device. The more you can make your writing extremely compact, the better. Also, stick to rules like active voice, not passive voice. Again, I can cover these in the next session depending on the feedback from this one. Next one, and this again goes back to selling the content, and you'll notice the theme here. Again, it goes back to promising that return on time invested. You got to know the no's, the reasons that people won't read, right? It's just going to be the same stuff I read everywhere else. That's the biggest one for me. I do a lot of high-level research, a lot of looking at best practices for things, a lot of the kind of research you do sort of before you even know you're going to need a product, which of course is that awareness phase. And if I think it's going to be the same kind of stuff I read everywhere else, I'm just going to skip it. If I think it's going to be a sales pitch, I'm just going to skip it. If it's going to be too hard to read or I'm not going to understand it, again, I'm going to skip it. Is it going to waste my time? Obviously, that's a big one because we're talking about ROTI. Those are all reasons I'm not going to read it. So answer all of these. And again, if you go back to the blank sheet of paper test, to selling the page, to writing like you have to convince people to care, then you're already dealing with this. The next thing is search engines don't buy your product, and your customers are not an algorithm. Writing great content is critical to search engine rankings. It is critical, but it's not for the reasons you may think. For one thing, it's not a bulk proposition. Having lots of content doesn't necessarily help. For another, stuffing lots of keywords into a piece of content is not how you get ranking. Okay? You want to put the right concepts there. You want to put the right terms into your document, but that should happen naturally if you're using the blank sheet of paper test. Interlinking content a ton does not, of its own volition, help you rank higher. It's all about linking like with like. Would someone get use from a particular link if they click it? That's the rule. And of course, write good stuff, but that's so generic and useless, I'm not going to go into it too far. Am I on the right track here, David, and everybody else? I just want to make sure. Are there any questions so far?
The guidance on how to write is very good, thank you.
Okay, great. The next one is put on the brakes. You gotta, and that is spelled that way deliberately. Reading online, again, is very hard. Okay, there's certain specific numbers that we've tested a lot and we're pretty sure are optimal. You want no more than 13 to 16 words on a line, and that's on a larger format device. You want to have no more than 6 to 8 lines per paragraph. You want no more than 3 to 4 paragraphs per chunk, and I'll explain that in a minute. These rules actually go all the way back to writing long sales letters and writing direct mail content. David Ogilvy and John Caples came up with a lot of this stuff. So this stuff is very grounded and rooted in things that we know people want to see. And the way you break things up is with subheadings, with images, with blocks and pull quotes. Use lists if you have listed content. Don't use commas or semicolons. So if you take a look at a piece of content like this article is 11,000 words, and it's online, but it gets broken up a lot. And it's actually been reshared about 1,100 times, or about 1,400 times now, so we know it's been pretty effective. And you can see there's a block quote, right? There's an image, there's some subheadings. It's because there's a logical structure to what is written here. It's also because we want to really bring that logical structure out. And that's what putting those breaks in there is all about. You really want to make it obvious that if someone just skims the page, because that's another phase in selling the page, is making it so that if someone just skims down the page first, it's very easy for them to see this is useful. You want to make sure it's really obvious. So again, that's why you break things up that way. Next one is you want to use images wisely, and there's a bunch of different things that play into this. One is just page speed and content delivery speed. There are some very easy ways I'm going to talk about in a minute to compress images. And this image, and this is for real, this is a 115 kilobyte image. This is an 18 kilobyte image. I just want to do that again. Can you see any difference? And seriously, I did compress these. I am not kidding. You want to use some kind of basic compression tool. There's stuff out there like smush.it, which is a Yahoo tool that's out there for compression. It's lossless, so it's not going to do anything to your image. You can get more fancy with JPEG and lossy compression. You don't have to. This will make your content appear so much faster. And if it loads faster, again, you're going to provide a better return on time invested because people are going to look at this stuff and it's going to show up more quickly. Another issue that I see happen a lot is people will upload content or images and then resize them using the tool they use to upload it. So like in WordPress, you can upload an image and have it be 1200 pixels wide and then just tell WordPress to make it appear as if it's 400 pixels wide on the page. And what happens then is this experience a lot of people have where they bring up the page, it loads really slowly, and then the image kind of draws itself in a line at a time, and it's just painful to watch. The reason that's happening is because someone has uploaded an image that is far wider and taller than it needs to be. Now that slows delivery, it does all sorts of bad things to the page. Again, it hurts return on time invested. There are great tools to help you do this. Yeah, Michael, I don't think you've changed the blog authoring package. I'm just talking about some of the general blog authoring tools out there. They all use very similar tool sets as far as ability to reshape and resize things.
I actually meant that towards David and others.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
Oh, okay, that's right. So in general, you can use smush.it, right? That'll do great compression for you. For resizing, if you're using WordPress, you can resize right in WordPress. There are also plugins that do even better. Hammy is one. WP smush.it actually uses the smush.it API and does all the compression and resizing for you. There's no reason to put images on the page that aren't already sized and compressed. So again, just really keep that in mind. So far, if you look at all this, it's all about return on time invested, right? It's all about making it easy in that awareness phase and that discovery phase for people to come and find your information really, really useful. And of course, you know who's going to come to find that information because you've already outlined your audience, and you know why they're going to find it useful and what kind of information they'll find useful because you've done the research into the kinds of questions they have. The last part here is you want to have a call to action. Now, when you're selling the page at the very top, you want a call to action, and it'll probably be something like read this page to learn more about X and Y. But at the bottom of the page, when they're all done, you want to have a call to action too. And that can be very complicated because you don't want to necessarily do a sales call. You can have a sales-driven call to action. Follow us, contact us for more information, whatever. But you also want to have something that's not driven by that. You want to have a call to action that focuses on the micro conversions. You really want to focus on the micro conversions. So whatever that is, share this content. Read more by looking at these other pieces of content on our site. Follow us on Twitter. Whatever it is, if you can attach a value to it, if you can tell folks, this is something you want to do, and then you can go to your bosses or to your spreadsheet or whatever else and say, this is generating value, here's how much value it's generating. That's what you want to have a call to action for. So again, really concrete stuff so that you can really figure out what the value is. So just, by the way, I tried to save 10 minutes at the end for questions. I think we're going to make that. Just revisiting the whole process. Okay, so the first thing is you want to sketch out those customers, and then you want to figure out the exact route they're going to take, or at least the general route they're going to take to making a purchase. Then you want to find gaps in your content. Where are you not covering and answering their questions? Where are you not helping them along that route? And understand, the gaps can be after they make the purchase. right? If they're going to go out to people and refer, if they're going to have success with the product, those may all be things that you need to do. Chances are you've already got the content that helps them have success. That's documentation, bug tracking, issue tracking, all that. But when you get beyond that, are you telling folks, hey, here's this really interesting article we just published about these 4 data points we've found. Here's 4 common mistakes we've discovered that people make when they're using this type of product. Those are things that will get people who already like you to forward your information to other people. And that then further builds the audience at that awareness phase, which gets more people into the process to have them micro-convert, which of course then gets them on the route to a macro conversion. At step 5, you want to then find the behaviors that generate the micro conversions. Then you want to create and revise a calendar based on everything you discovered in 1 through 5. So, you want to make sure that your calendar is going to focus on the right customers, that it's going to fill in those gaps, and that it's targeting micro conversions and the right behaviors. But don't turn the calendar into this really rigid administrative process. That's not the idea. The calendar is a set of guidelines. It's a place to set the ground rules. It's a place to really call out the content you really want or do not want. And then you get to that content creation phase. And I know it seems like I'm spending a lot of time on things that don't involve creating content, but if you do those first 6 steps at least once in a while, it is so much easier to write stuff. And when I say a blog post should take no more than a couple hours, it'll become very evident why. Because if you've already done 1 through 6, you don't spend a whole lot of time sitting around trying to figure out what am I going to write. You don't have to spend a lot of time working on what will my first sentence be. You've already got all that figured out. So just kind of wrapping this up so we have time for questions. For you all, this is basically, this is the overall process, right? It's awareness to consideration. And consideration here, awareness here means that early discovery phase where they don't necessarily know that they need you. Then the consideration phase where they're actually researching your product, intent, then they convert, then they have success, and then we're back to the kind of content that we need to prepare, which is the loyalty content. And of course, that all comes back to this. And what we are working on, what I'm talking about in these 3 trainings, is all the content from awareness to the left. And specifically, it's going to be referral, network, and awareness content. Referral content being stuff that you send to people and they say, to existing customers, they say, oh, that's really interesting, and they forward it to their friends. Network is where the friends forward it to other friends. Awareness is where the forwardees, the people who receive those referrals, start looking at stuff, and other people just discover your content through social media, through promotions you do, through whatever else. That then fills the top of the funnel and gets lots and lots of people involved right when you want them to enter consideration. And that's really the goal here. So this was kind of the lightning round. I gave you the very high level look at all of the entire sketch of how we do this. I'm not really going to revisit the why and the what again in this course unless someone specifically asks. Next time I'm going to talk specifically, I'm going to spend a few minutes on audience research and calendar setting, and then we're going to dive really, really deeply into the 8 rules. The third session will either be an even deeper exploration of the 8 rules or a discussion of content analytics and promotion, and it will depend heavily on how the next session goes. Coming out of this session, key things you really want to understand. The whole funnel concept, the 70-20-10 concept, the relative effort. Writing a single blog post should not become a huge, multi-day process. If it is, or if that is happening to you a lot, tell me, and we'll make that part of what we talk about in the 8 rules process, because there's some tricks I can probably give you to help with that. And then just, basically how you prepare this stuff, that 8-step, that 7-step process. Some very basic homework, and I'm only doing the 500-word essay because my kids are in middle school and they're getting their final exam stuff, but I crossed it out, don't worry. So you definitely want to map the customer journey for one of the products for which you're responsible. just something, anything. If you could send me something, that would be fantastic. But the main objective here is that you have this written down in front of you, so that in the next session, where I'm going to be focusing more on the steps that follow after and before, you have what you need to work forward. Now, if a few of you can send me those journeys, I can then really target the training and customize it around them. If not, that's okay. I'll come up with something. And then also see if you can find some gaps. That's an exercise we're going to do anyway, but if you can, take a look at it and find the actual gaps in the content, the things where you feel you don't have stuff yet, that would be fantastic as well. And just remember, there is stuff up on this bit.ly link bundle. It will continuously grow as the training goes on. And yes, Michael, you can get slides in advance. Absolutely. Sorry about that. I have to admit, I was converting a lot of stuff to your template over the last couple of days. But the next few sessions are already converted, so I'll get those to you. Any questions, concerns, things you'd like me to talk about that I haven't talked about? Is anyone muted who's asking a question?
You're good as far as an intro is concerned, Ian.
Okay.
Looking forward to the next two sessions.
Okay. Great. Well, folks, if you have questions afterwards, you can forward them to, I think, Renee or David. Is that right?
Send them to myself, David.
Okay. You can send them to David, and he'll forward them to me. I'll make sure that they get answered either in between the sessions or in the next session. Thanks, everybody, and I will talk to you in the next training.